I guess I was going to start with this koan, and I'm going to still start with this koan. And after a while, you may ask what the relevance of this koan is. And you would be right to do so. Anyway, a monk asked Joshu in all earnestness, what is the meaning of the patriarchs coming from the West? And you all know that that is our man Bodhidharma. Joshu said, the oak tree there in the garden. Joshu's teaching on that occasion is the oak tree there in the garden. Which perhaps we'll return to. I want to read a little quote that I received, which is so sweet. It comes from a Tibetan, Jetsun Khandro Rinpoche. And the quote is this: the sun, whether or not it is recognized, appreciated, or even seen, is accessible to whomever might benefit from it. In the same way, determined to be constantly gentle and giving to others, without a strategy, without a plan, and without ambition. Let me repeat that. The sun, whether or not it is recognized, appreciated, or even seen, is accessible to whomever might benefit from it. In the same way, determined to be constantly gentle and giving to others, without a strategy, without a plan, without an ambition. Now, in a way, that circles back to our friend the oak tree. The oak tree gives its shade to whatever being might want to come and be there without a strategy, without a plan, without an ambition. It gives its acorns to whatever beings might want those to help themselves strive without a strategy, without a plan, without ambition. And maybe eventually it gives its wood to create a warming fire. And it does so without a strategy, without a plan, without an ambition. The oak tree's beneficence is its nature. It's not a strategy. It's not trying to earn good karma for its next life or some such thing. It's just its nature. And that, what the Buddha taught, what Bodhidharma taught, what everybody throughout the centuries has taught, is that that is our nature too. When we talk about having Buddha nature, when we express and manifest our Buddha nature, we are constantly gentle and giving to others without a strategy, without a plan, without ambition. Now that's radical. In this age and day and age, it's extraordinarily radical. It's subversive. Of course, we need strategies, we need plans, we need ambitions. That's the American way. Yeah, on Christmas Day, Elizabeth and I went to see the Bob Dylan movie. And I won't get off too far into that. But in that movie, they depict when Pete Seeger was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee for singing subversive songs like "This land is your land, this land is my land." He was seriously called before Congress to account for that. So our Dharma is subversive in a sense. It doesn't say determined to constantly acquire as much crap as you can, make sure it's yours, lock it up, defend it with a gun, and tell your neighbors to go F themselves. It's radical. It's like the teachings of Jesus, radical. That's why Christians today have such difficulty relating to the teachings of Jesus. Because Jesus, like the Buddha, was telling us that those are not the things that matter. What matters? Being constantly gentle, giving to others without a strategy, without a plan, and without ambition. Like Elon Musk. So, of course, the problem is exactly that. We all have egos. We all have selves that believe that we are separate. And because we are separate, we can be selfish. I can acquire things for me that are mine and not yours. I can get angry at you if your beliefs don't coincide with mine. In fact, I can hate you if your beliefs don't coincide with mine. I can get angry and frustrated and tired and cranky and unfair. And I could go on and on and on and on and obscure that constantly gentle and giving nature. And I do quite regularly. So, this is the heart and soul of our practice. This is the whole reason we put our butts on cushions. This is the whole reason that we show up on Sunday mornings. This is the whole reason that we have retreats coming up. So that we can, as best we can, determined to be constantly gentle and giving to others without a strategy, without a plan, without ambition. Now, you'll notice the word enlightenment is not in that statement. It doesn't say, I will get enlightened in order to constantly determined to be constantly gentle and giving, etc. Well, maybe that's because it's a crazy Tibetan who said it. But I don't think so. I struggle with this myself. Roots of our practice, all about realizing our true nature. We just talked about that. We talked about seeing into our true nature as the root of our practice. And some of you might say, well, I haven't done that yet. So how can I do this? How can it be accessible to me if I haven't realized my true nature? And so I think I have to postpone all this nice stuff. until I have a great awakening? Well, there's a couple of answers. So that's a complex and it's a question that often comes up for me as someone who's ostensibly teaching the Dharma. What about this enlightenment? Isn't that the most important thing? Isn't that what Shakyamuni's life and teaching brings to us? Isn't that why Bodhidharma sat in a cave for 9 years or 8 years instead of visiting all the temples and palaces that there were in China at that time? And I think the answer to that question is very complex. But first off, I'm going to answer it in about three different ways. Which first is we can't afford to wait. The world cannot afford to wait. And we don't know. Will we realize ourselves in this lifetime? Will we become Buddhas in this lifetime? Who knows? So we can not afford to wait to be constantly gentle and giving to others, that they may never come. And we've wasted the opportunity of this lifetime. The second thing is that if and when we are constantly gentle and giving to others without a strategy, without a plan, without ambition, we are manifesting Buddha nature. We are Buddha nature. Whether or not we've had a big kensho or not is immaterial in that context. That is Buddha nature. That is what Shakyamuni was pointing to. So we have that opportunity, whoever we are, every day, every moment of every day. We don't have to wait for the Big Bang Kensho. And thirdly, the more that we proceed down this path of being constantly gentle and giving to others without a strategy, without a plan, and without ambition, we are moving on that path to realization. All three of those things are true. So it requires work, right? I made that list before of all the kinds of things that, at least for me, obscure my ability to do that. All my ego states, all my selfish desires, all my cranky old man moods and things that obscure my true nature. So it's a project. It's a project in every day, in every moment. It's never easy. We need to be like that oak tree, expressing our nature every day as best we can. The oak tree doesn't say, I'm only going to exhibit my nature on sunny days. I'm only going to be an oak tree when it isn't snowing outside. I'd really like to help the squirrels, but they have to help themselves first. They have to be deserving of my assistance. The oak tree just does its thing day after day. Like the sun. Constantly gentle and giving to others without a strategy, without a plan, and without ambition.
Peter, I just want to say thank you for the phrase crazy authenticity.
I don't even know what it means, but it sounds good. And well, what's his name? Trump had crazy wisdom, right? That's every time he got drunk and had sex with his students or something. That was crazy wisdom.
That's right.
But we're going to have crazy authenticity.
I like that. Thank you.
Uh, I'm sort of seeing crazy authenticity as as our nature. So we see our own crazy authenticity. And if that's going to be more accessible as a result of sitting, doing Zazen, um, the connection that comes to me is that it's really all about dropping our egos or letting go of our separateness and uh, just being who we are, which if we are one body with everyone, we want to treat others kindly as we would want to be. Um, but I also um, think that without a strategy or plan is sort of a paradox because I mean we're all sitting here and we're listening to this and it's hard not to think, yes, well, this makes a lot of sense. So what's my strategy? I'm going to sit more. I'm going to um, be more gracious or generous when I'm out in the world. Um, it's it's And when you were talking about without strategy and plan, that reminded me a little bit of the Tao, um, which I always enjoy reading, especially during these political times. Things just flow. Um, but eliminating strategy or plan, um, maybe that's saying, let's get out of our heads and let's just sit and let go. So I don't know if that's a question, Peter, but um, I guess I guess what I'm asking is, uh, would you would you agree that discovering our own nature is going to be letting go of our ego, and therefore Zazen is the best way to get there? And figure your strategy for doing that, and everything else will fall into place.
Good. Let's start with a simple question this morning. Look, why is it crazy? Why, when am I talking about crazy authenticity? Because crazy authenticity isn't analytical. It isn't figuring out the best way. It isn't stepping back and taking the long view. It's immersive. It's leaping in and it's acting courageously. Courageously. It takes courage to be authentic to our own true nature, because we're taught not to. I've often used that example of encountering the unhoused person on the street. And maybe our first reaction, our unconditioned reaction, is a generous one. I'm going to hand this person $10 so they can have a nice lunch. And then we start to think, right? We start to pull back. Oh, well, maybe they're not, maybe they're going to use it on alcohol or drugs. And, you know, maybe they don't deserve it. Maybe they're not out here because they're really needy, but they're just lazy, and we construct a whole narrative obscuring that moment of authentic response. Now, maybe we're right and maybe we're wrong in certain terms, but in terms of the Dharma, we are right. We are right, you know, but we're compulsively analytical. We're addicted to it. And our culture tells us that's the way we have to respond. And again, I go back to, we just had Christmas. I actually went to church on Christmas Eve. Maybe that's sort of gotten into my pores or something. But um, I have two friends that are both pastors, husband and wife, and they renewed their vows on Christmas Eve. They originally got married on Christmas Eve, and then it was very nice. Anyway, well, I think it's contaminated me. But that's what Jesus was saying. you know, welcome the stranger, feed the poor, house the homeless. He didn't say, well, like, think about it, analyze it, make sure you're absolutely right. So it's crazy, right? It's crazy authenticity. It's challenging us to act upon those first reactions, those impulses of compassion and loving kindness, without parsing out, analyzing, all of those things that we do. Is that right or wrong? And the, the Dharma doesn't talk about that. The Dharma just says, express that compassionate nature. And I think the assumption is that we will not go wrong. When we go wrong is when we start creating our narratives, we start creating our analyses. And I say, well, if I give somebody a piece of cake, they might be a diabetic and then they're going to have a blood sugar spike and die. you know.
So if so we have that nature inside us, and I think what you're saying is that that nature is innately good uh, and generous to others. And so remaining present to where you are, what's in front of you, is going to be a practice that's going to attune you more to acting on that first impulse.
In a sense, I mean, going to the other part of your question about Zazen, what we do on the cushions, the Zazen, is merely the preparation for doing that in our lives, right? So Zazen is not the path in itself, it's merely a pointer to the path. The path is how we actualize that in our lives. We're not trying to become good sitters, we're trying to become good human beings. So the Zazen is a tool, a very important tool. But our practice, in a sense, really starts the minute we get off that cushion and step back fully into the stream of our lives. What do we do then? Who are we then?
And I would think how we manifest our true nature in the world uh, is going to be somewhat different from one person to the next.
Well, that's absolutely a possibility.
Mhm.
It may be the same, it may be different. It's not dependent on.
And it's an individual's own interaction with the world in front of them.
Yes. Well, yes, it's like very much like the precepts, right? We don't all see the precepts identically.
Mm.
We don't all engage with the precepts identically. The common thread is the engagement. The common thread is the practice.
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure.
Well, it's kind of an unanswerable one, but yes, I think that sheds light greatly. And it is ironic how many books and treatises exist on Buddhism, despite the fact that the teachings are supposed to come from within, without words and meanings and our mind getting in there. So can't blame us for being confused, I think.
Well, I don't blame us. There are more books written about Buddhism than any other religion. So much for silence. But that said, I think it shows how powerfully we are conditioned and how hard it is to give up that conditioning. And because we are conditioned to use this first, I mean, it's kind of illogical that that's how we come at it. We're trying to relinquish our narratives. We're kind of relinquish our attachments, but because we're so centered there, we go that way first. if we go back to, I don't know how many 100 years, but if a number, when you showed up at a Zen monastery, first of all, they didn't even let you in the door, right? And they left you outside for a while just to see if you were really determined. Then it rained, it snowed, it was hot and sunny, do whatever it did. And if after a few days you were still there, they thought you had some promise, at least enough promise to be taken in and allowed to enter the community. And then what did you do? You sat there. You worked. They gave you jobs and you sat. And in most instances, or in many instances, it was at least 2 years before you even talked to the teacher. So they came right at it. They weren't going to humor you because you had narratives that you were attached to and so on and so forth. They ripped them right away. Well, we already have a lack of Zen students. If we started doing that, we'd have nobody, right? It's like, you know, but that's the truth. All the books don't teach the Dharma. There's not one book that teaches the Dharma of the tens of thousands that exist. And every day, I see reviews. This teacher or that teacher or somebody else has written a new book. Are those bad? No. They serve a function. It's like saying if someone has difficulty walking, their crutch is bad. No, their crutch is necessary. God, I went back to Christmas Eve, went to this Christmas Eve service, and many of the congregants were elderly, very high percentage. And of those, almost everybody required some type of assistance walking. Walkers, canes, and it's kind of, I don't know how I'm digressing a little, but that's poverty, rural poverty. You know, it's privilege that those of us that are older can still walk. you know, kind of, kind of, very, very difficult to see. So I got myself on a tangent I should not be on. But now I'm not going to get back on track. So where did I leave off? Oh, nobody was paying attention. Now I got you.
I kind of want to um talk about a piece of this a little bit. So, when you talk about the beautiful oak tree, not plan, not strategy, I go back to, oh, didn't I plan and strategize hugely in order to be able to become the doctor who could give the way I could give? Um, and so I've been stewing in that. It's like, well, what about me? I strategized, but I'm thinking, how did the oak tree get to be the oak tree? We have no idea, but we do know that the oak tree is particular and unique and had to grow from something to become. And so I'm seeing that for me, I did feel that I had to strategize and plan. And I kept flopping around trying to think, what could I do? What could I do? How could I do something meaningful? What could I do? So I'm flopping around like a fish out of what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And it feels like actually a kind of miracle random walk more than that Deborah actually strategized her way into becoming Dr. Hoffer. Just that's true. So I'm feeling like it's not that we we think we have strategies and plans and we care. So because we care and arguably we don't understand that surrender is enough, I'm just speaking very, very loosely. Obviously, that's a lot going on with that. So we experience it as strategy and plan, but the more we kind of respond authentically to whatever is going on around us, the more we actually are liberated to be giving and gentle as our true nature um, is, I'm going to even use the word empowered to do. So I, I hope that made some sense. I don't know.
It does. And so let me go a little further with this. If any of you decided to become a professional baseball player, and I know that a number of you are thinking about that. Okay, how would you do that? Would you go out on the field with your authentic mind and swing away? Might be interesting. You'd have the shortest career in baseball anybody ever had. No. You would practice not just hundreds of times, thousands of times, right? Holding the bat, swinging the bat, working on your stance, working on and on and on and on, analyzing the pitchers. What are their strategies? Da 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 da. And in that moment when that fastball is coming at you at 90 miles an hour, which one of those are you going to use? And I would like to think that when that surgeon puts the knife into my body, that they're not thinking about all the strategies that they could use or not use, but that they are acting decisively from their training and instincts as a surgeon, just as that batter is acting from their training and practice as a batter. Right? So we can't take these things. It's both things are true, right? And to some extent, we need to strategize, we need to prepare, we need to practice. And to some extent, we need to let go and act.
So interesting. Um, yeah, it feels like true nature of each particular one of us emerges. And here we are with our little branches and our particular acorns.
It's very interesting. I've been reading some Rupert Sheldrake stuff. People know he's a biologist. He's kind of considered a fringe biologist, but they don't know how the acorn becomes an oak tree. Genetics doesn't fully explain it. It doesn't explain it. Epigenetics starts to explain it, but even that, they don't know how all those cells know how to diverge appropriately to come together to form this massive tree correctly. We don't have that mechanism. Right? So we sort of take it for granted, oh, little acorns become big oak trees, but nobody knows how. You know?
Well, and right when you see baseball players and they, give thanks to God before or after they strike a home run or whatever, and Deborah, I dare say, surgeons before they go into surgery would maybe say a little prayer, and then you'd be connecting to God, but also your authentic self, right? And saying, "Hey, let's do this," and you know, just a thought.
No, it's true. You have to be crazy authentic to even, in my case, just being who I am, to even sit there and say you're going to be helpful rather than harmful. I mean, it's a big problem. And for me, it certainly wasn't, well, yeah, I was going to say it wasn't God, but it was some kind of you know, faith and surrender and humility as well as authentic craziness. It's an interesting thing. It's a very interesting thing for us to just do the simple thing, but with our own particular, yeah, so our own particular colors and flavors. So maybe that's kind of helpful in terms of the each of us has to overcome our own stuff even to figure out, yes, I can just give this money to this guy on the street. Fuck it. But whatever.
I think that each of us overcoming our own stuff as I go along on my journey here is becoming what I think I don't want to say the point because I don't know the point, but we come into the existence with our own stuff, with our own bundle of neurons and our own parents and our own experiences and our own traumas and our own perceptions of those traumas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what a lot of what we're talking about today is like the absolute versus the relative. I think we have to deal with the relative in order to understand the absolute. So like Susan, you were talking about like, okay, so I hear this great talk from Peter, and then I think you were saying, this is how I interpreted what you were saying. My mind goes into operational mode, or ego goes into operational mode, which is, well, what do I do now? Do I volunteer more? Do I give more money to homeless people? Do I, whatever. And I think that's what we're up against. That's a shitty way of putting it, but I think that's what we're up against is that uh, if we're all the one, if we're all innately the sun, but we're experiencing ourselves through filters, uh, and the filter is driven by like, well, I want to go to med school, I want to be a surgeon, so shit, there's a lot of prep and training and all sorts of rigmarole for that. Or a Major League Baseball player, my God, same thing. And in that time, the ego is saying, well, I want to be the best, or I have to go to this school, I have to be on this team, or I have to go to this college in order to, and that's all part of the curriculum. And we can't avoid the curriculum. We're here for the curriculum. And the curriculum is going to continue to prompt us to to get better and be better than everyone else. Crap. You ever been to a seminar and it's like, or a training and everyone's jotting down furiously and asking the right questions and worried about asking the wrong question and getting all the notes. And it's just effort, 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 which is kind of what we do when we listen to Peter, right? Susan, it's like, well, and me and everyone. It's like, well, okay, what do I do? Well, what do I do? What do I do how do I make it, better? How do I get there quicker? Which is what we're talking about. But that's what I think, for my money, that's what we're supposed to be experiencing. And we're supposed to be seeing that and then saying, okay, I'm doing my thing again, or I'm doing the thing again. And every time you bring it to this moment and recognize, I'm doing the thing again, I think you're getting closer to the sun or being the sun. Even if you're going to a program to become a surgeon, I can only imagine what that's like. But every day it must be like, I gotta go to, oh, wait a minute. There I am doing the thing again. And bringing yourself back over and over and over again, I think is why we do Zazen. I think brings us closer probably to moments of Kensho, but I try not to be attached to moments of Kensho because then I'll be trying to get moments of Kensho. So I guess in essence, we're talking about some heavy shit. But I think in essence, it's we're supposed to experience the relative and bang our head against the relative every single day in order to get back to the absolute.
Uh, I'd just like to comment on what Robert just said about the thing and throw another metaphor into the mix. So we've got our baseball player and we've got our surgeon, but I'd like to throw the musician into the mix too, because when I experience music that is being performed by someone who's authentically crazy, what happens is not what happens when I watch the baseball player or I'm the subject of the surgeon. But what happens is that crazy authenticity alleviates in me the need of the thing. There's a reciprocity, there's a resonating effect when I experience crazy authenticity in the form of art, for example, music in this metaphor, that puts to rest the analytical, the need of the thing, the cognitive, in the best situations. And it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen for me. And so I like to put myself in the opportunities of having those experiences by affording myself artistic experiences as best I can, which is a requirement of authenticity on my part in the sense that I need to prepare myself for the openness of that experience. And when it happens, it's like this beautiful symmetry between the performer and my response to the performance, such that all of this stuff is just gone. It's just the oak in the corner of the garden.
I just want to share for a second, for those of you who may have surgery soon, that it does become um, um, a dance. So the musician, of course, in order to get to that place of crazy authenticity, does develop skills. And I was shocked out of my ego to realize that ultimately the surgery I could do didn't feel like it was linearly related to Deborah's practice. It was just fuck, wow. Um, so one can experience that as God or a gift or a miracle or whatever that one is present to. Um, but it's like music. It is like music because, or at least my experience was, again, it wasn't the sum total of linear actions. It was a kind of a leap. Don't be nervous when you hear that because it works just like the music works.
Back to the Dylan movie for a moment. The way he's portrayed in the movie, and I've done some little looking online, and I think it may be accurate, is as neurodivergent, that he's kind of somewheres on the Asperger scale. He can't look anybody in the eye, and he drives the women in his life nuts because they want him to show up for them, and he cannot. He's like, I'm writing this song, leave me alone, kind of thing. And I think that, he is a music savant in a sense. And this is what we're talking about. There's nothing between him and that music, much to Joan Baez's and frustration, because that's all he's seeing. are the notes. Very interesting. If you have a chance to see that movie, it has a lot of interesting dimensions to it.
I thought for a long time that Bob Dylan would not be somebody I would want to know as a friend. And that movie pointed that out, I think. So I see what you're seeing. Um, and I like the comments about Doug about art and about music. Um, there's something there's a phrase that I like about they use it about this. The old style would be primitive art. You don't dare to use that anymore, I suppose. But there's something very beautiful about an art that is unself-conscious, and that that phrase is kind of kicking around in my head here when we're talking about the concept of gentleness. There are some things that I do that are really instinctively gentle immediately. I don't, there's not a second thought at all. But there are many that I have to think, wait a minute, I'm rushing here very fast to my conclusion. This is not granting an openness. It's not approaching this gently. By the way, another character in this movie that I've always thought was somewhat Zen was Pete Seeger, because of his wonderful, open and loving kindness to just about everything and everybody. It comes through in that movie quite beautifully. So I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that I kind of feel that I'm both a gentle schemer and also gentle by nature, and um, and I think that Zazen, but it helps, as you say, it is a pointer, Peter, which is clear, but also practice. It's just practice, I think, uh, when I confront this, and that is scheming, I suppose, in a broad way. But I think I see it as both to try to get to the goal.
Thank you, Cal.
I have like a really a very deep connection to music, and I I'm not a good improviser because my brain gets in the way. I'm always thinking. Um, I've had some moments in certain circumstances. I'm thinking of one thing, a workshop I went to at the Omega Institute in upstate New York, and they sort of put me in this situation where we're improvising together, supporting each other, and somehow, finally all the mental stuff drops out of the way, partly because of feeling supported, and but you but it's also sort of the innate tendency to support others, and somehow it created a situation where I could like improvise like 100 times better than I normally can, but it's totally without, you know, um, it's sort of like the brain is necessary to a degree. There is some thought involved in it, even when you're doing it really well, sort of a very high level, subtle guidance of direction. And but the problem seems to be that there's no limit. Once the thought stuff starts going, it can just take over. We haven't evolved. It's like we somehow evolved to the point that we could have these thoughts, and they're very useful for building things and stuff like that. But we haven't evolved to the point yet where it's sort of limited in any way. Once it gets going, it can just keep on going until it is very controlling. And the crazy authenticity, I agree, that's a wonderful new term, is hidden. and it's necessary for great art or for generosity or almost anything that matters. So
In Rinzai, as some of you know, I've talked about this also before. The certain Rinzai schools where you don't get your koan till you walk into the Daishan room, and the teacher presents the koan, and you have to respond. You know, which is not unlike improv. Someone mentioned improvisation. Improv. You get in there, and your partner gives a line, and you've got to react immediately to that line. There's no room for thinking. There just literally isn't room for it. Very interesting. So there's something to that Rinzai practice, I think, in terms of you don't go deep into the koan. You can't the way that we do and spend days or weeks or months contemplating it. But you do cultivate that ability to step off the top of the 100-foot pole and react intuitively. Somebody said, all of these things need to be balanced. We can't go to can't say, okay, I'm just going to react and step off this curb and not analyze whether there are any cars coming that might squash me. There's a place for both.
Uh, a word that is sticking in my head is the one that Doug used when he talked about reciprocity. And it seems like being crazy authentic requires reciprocity, requires interaction with something. You're not just crazy authentic alone. There's some interaction of your own self with whoever you're dealing with or with the earth or so I think reciprocity is an important uh, concept when uh, trying to spontaneously muster your son, your inner Buddha nature. You're interacting with something to express that.
Yes, well, I want to close sort of with a dilemma that Peter Harris talked about from time to time. And I'm going to rephrase it in the language of one of the koans. You're standing on the curb. A child runs out into the street and is about to be hit by a car. With which self are you going to save that child? Or maybe you're not going to save that child. But I'm assuming that's not an option.
I don't know if you were waiting for somebody to say something, so both. Both.
Or none. In that moment, it's all moot. It's all moot. It's not even a question. Right? Not even a question. Who am I going to be? Will I step out boldly or will I step out slowly? Will I be smiling or will I be frightened? No, you just go, right? Everything is thrown away, gone, reacting in the moment. And if I do that, can I do that wrong? If my entire being in that moment is thrown into saving the life of that child, is there a way that I can make a mistake? Much to think about as we are about to go into the year 2025. And to paraphrase Edward R. Murrow, it was a year like any other year, but you will be there. May well not be like any other year.
It will be the last year of the first quarter of the 21st century.
Well, that's a landmark that I never thought I'd reach. Well, I haven't reached it yet. I got to make it, what, another 48 hours.
I would like to offer the Sangha a chant that is used by Estelle Gerard, whom Peter knows. She is a long-term Zen practitioner in Florida. Todd considers her a Roshi. I do too. The chant came from Soen Nakagawa Roshi, her teacher, a Rinzai teacher. And before we do our vows, I would love to read this to you. It is from Soen. All is purified as it is now. All is revealed as it is now. All is realized as it is now. All is enlightened as it is now. Okay, okay, okay.
A good note to close on. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Okay, if one of you can utter a word, I will go on. If none of you can utter a word, I'm going to raise my hand, so we're going to go on. Say goodbye.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day and a happy new year. And I will see you all on the other side.